my name is Ellie Benson, and I did my big board on how countercultures of the past 5 decades have turned into future mainstreams. So, first, how did I think of my topic? While I was thinking of my topic, I decided to kind of focus on pop culture, music and fashion, because for me that's something that's very appealing. I love listening to music as a teenage girl, and I've always been very interested in fashion. I plan to do something with it later in life. And so I started with that. Where did I want to go? And then a few days later, my sister and I were talking about clothing trends, just coincidentally, and how our mom, when she was a kid, used to wear similar clothes. And then today we're wearing very similar clothes to that. But then we realized that some of the clothes that we were wearing today, she would never dare to wear. And that's where I kind of started with this. I started to research and see why this was, or was this coincidental, was this on purpose, just investigating it. So next, what research did I conduct? As I said, I started researching with clothing trends and how past ones were coming back, what were clothing trends of the future, what were clothing trends now, what was on the runway. And then all of this research kind of led me to music and music festivals, what people were wearing at music festivals, how music festivals are popular, what music went along with these trends, etc., etc. And I quickly really started to notice that these all follow the same trend. They start by one group, and they're not very popular. Then they kind of fade out, but then they come back and they're massive hits, hitting the runway, hitting the Billboard Top 100s, popular events for everyone to go to, etc. So now, before I really start getting into my paper, I think I should define counterculture, mainstream, and pop culture. Three very common terms and crucial for understanding what I'm about to talk about. So counterculture is a group of people within a culture that separate themselves from the large group or the norm due to different values, views, beliefs they have. Next, we have mainstream. This is attitudes, ideas, beliefs that are of the norm. Everyone's thinking them. And lastly, we have pop culture. And pop culture is ideals of humor, charisma, mystery, love that are as well common or uncommon. And they normally include movies, music, fashion, anything popular really that is an art. So now what all of my research led me to, which was that counterculture of the past 5 decades have continuously evolved into future mainstream trends of fashion and music through the commercialization of countercultures. So how did I find this out? Let's start with music. Well, music is a very obviously popular form of pop culture, and there's so many different types of music out there. And I noticed that music begins a part of the counterculture, as I said before, in one generation, then within the next few decades becomes a Billboard top hit. Well, so how did this really start? How can we see that this happened? Well, it all happens with different generations, and we can see this in rock and roll music, for example. Rock and roll music was started by youth movements in the United Kingdom in the United States, as they were listened to it as a rebellious genre that was embraced by the youth. And then it was never really popular as kids, but as this youth movement grew older, they stuck with this music, and as they were older and they were adults, that's when it grew massive, because they were the ones getting the jobs and mass producing the music. This can also be seen with Bob Dylan, another popular counterculture artist, and rap music. So all of this music pattern is very significant because it demonstrates how quickly a voice of resistance became commercialized and sold to the mainstream. How quickly this youth movement that was a rebellious genre became the mainstream. Well, how did this happen? Businesses. Businesses learned they could profit from this music that wasn't a hit. And so some say that this commercialization isn't bad though, because it's what the consumer and what the masses want. But technically it's what the consumer wants, but they don't really know the meaning behind it, which loses part of our history. It's important to show the significance of counterculture because it expresses the critiques of mainstream culture that are necessary for growth. Next, we have music festivals. Music festivals today are growing huge. They're predicted to become bigger than sporting events. Over time, from one generation to the next, they've changed from who goes to them, why people go to them, and what happens at them. They're now popular among the masses. So this first started with Woodstock. It was one of the first music festivals. It happened in August of 1969. And it was a celebration of beliefs, and people who went to it tried to distance themselves from the mainstream of society. It was kind of them all banding together. All of this huge counterculture group banding together to stay away from the mainstream of society. Then music festivals kind of disappeared for a while because of all the chaos from Woodstock, and reappeared in the 1990s with Austin City Limits, Bonnaroo, Lollapalooza, all the huge ones that I'm sure many of you have heard of or even attend. Then, as they returned, they were a money-making business. They had many different types of music artists coming to them, ones that were huge on the radio that everyone loved, rather than these artists that belonged to the counterculture. They were made for the mainstream to come and socialize that while listening to their favorite radio songs live. Some say the reason for coming to these music festivals didn't really ever change though, which I guess is true if you're looking at it from a very broad spectrum, people going to a place and listening to various artists that they like. But this also isn't really true because at first, music festivals were supposed to celebrate the rejection from society, whereas today it is all of society going and joining in at them. Today, people come to listen to music, while these huge corporations that are putting on these music festivals are making billions and billions of dollars. The festivals themselves continue to thrive, and the commercialization of these festivals transform counterculture movement into something that can be profitable and enjoyed by the mainstream. Lastly is fashion. So this is where my whole thing really started. From generation to generation, major trends of the past 5 years have all been repeated. But it's very likely that all of you here today aren't shocked by this because you're wearing these trends or have participated in these trends. The fashion industry has found it easy to use old, edgy trends and reintroduce them to the public is something that can be enjoyed by the masses. So, this commercialization or reintroduction of the clothing trends that are now very popular drowns out the meaning behind the original trend. For example, the army jacket, a staple piece that many of you have in your closet today. But when it appeared in the 60s, it was an iconic counterculture piece. It was worn in irony to represent peace and symbolize this counterculture's views against war and why they thought war was wrong. But now, as you all know, it's just for fashion in a trendy, edgy piece. This can also be seen with trends such as grunge, which was trying to separate themselves from society, but now, again, a classic edgy piece. Or combat boots / Doc Martens, a popular shoe that many of you have. And this can all kind of be predicted, some designers noticed, by a simple algorithm. This algorithm is that you take today's date, 2016, and subtract 25 years, which is the average age of designers that are mass producing these trends. This algorithm shows how famous people, or how designers are using past trends to the best of their ability. They're utilizing their old trends that they never really got to participate in, whether they like them or not, and making them popular ones now. It's easy for them to do this through celebrities. Celebrities such as Rihanna are always seen wearing edgy trends that these designers are producing. So now what's to come? What's next? These fashion trends provide insight for what lies ahead. And now for the future. Now that we know what causes this pattern, why this pattern is happening, and how this pattern is happening, we can predict mainstreams and countercultures of the future, which is very important if we want to learn from our history and stop this continuous pattern of going backwards in time. Popular countercultures in the future that are expected are, first, one called greed busters. These are people who are angered at and try to disassociate from the financial industry. There's also those who plan to live through voluntary work, and those who are going to be obsessed with technology, similar to how we are now. All these seem very reasonable, and I'm sure you all are nodding your head yes, as you can expect these are going to happen, and maybe you're going to be a part of them. But predicting these provides insight for what lies ahead, what's to come, what is going to be our future. So, in conclusion, how has commercialization of the past 5 decades moved into the future mainstreams? Commercialization. All of these trends and items have resurfaced throughout times through patterns, and they've resurfaced as very popular. People who start these counterculture movements are almost always kids. The youth predict the future unknowingly. They're the original source of these mainstream trends, but they aren't necessarily held for blame for this backwards momentum because they don't know what's happening. They're the ones merely starting the counterculture movement, and older generations are the ones reversing time. So rock and roll music fought against segregation, hippies fought against war and materialism, and the grunge movement challenged the ideals of conformity. The issue is that when the meaning of these counterculture trends is drowned out in order to make them appealing to the mainstream, our society loses its ability to critique itself and learn from counterculture movements that were trying to send a huge message to the mainstream. So what we can get, now that we know where the root of the problem is, or where the root of the problem starts in youth movements, we can learn from that. We can take this and watch younger generations and really listen to what they're saying and ensure that we live in a forward-moving society from now on. So, after this, how did this impact me? What kind of happened? To say the least, I was shocked. I was so surprised that America was letting aspects of history fade into commercialization. We must be aware of what's happening and why it's happening. We have to stay informed, pass the message on to others, as well as pass the message on to future generations, to pay attention to the countercultures and learn from them, take in what they have to say. Even if we don't agree with it, we're bound to agree with it in the future as we take the mere looks of it rather than the actual ideas behind it through commercialization. The best way to make sure this isn't happening again is to teach the side of history not being taught. Teach the side of counterculture. inform kids and younger generations on counterculture, teach them what it is and why it's important, and teach them the dangers of commercialization and what it's doing to us. So what my community outreach project was, how did I turn this huge idea into something that I could make a difference in? So I wanted to come up with a way to incorporate this trend of giving while still incorporating the ideas behind my paper. I decided the best way to do this was to create a clothing drive, because trends are always going in and out of style, clearly, as we have learned, but there's 15% of Americans who are living in poverty who can't even afford clothing, much less what's hitting the runway, or rather they're focusing on counterculture and mainstream. So I decided to get in contact with the Baldwin Center, a program I'd previously been in contact with, and their program, whose mission is to feed, clothe, educate, and empower men, women, and kids of the Pontiac community. I wanted to do a clothing drive with them, as they have a huge clothes closet program, and all of the clothes that I was going to be, all the clothing I was going to raise in this drive was going to go to kids and adults of all ages in the Pontiac community. So now the logistics of my project: where, what, why. I wanted to put the boxes in places that I had a connection with, so I put them at Seahome, a Dot Shalom synagogue in Corton Elementary School, which is the elementary school I attended. And my goal of the drive was not only to provide people that couldn't afford clothing was not only to provide clothes for those who couldn't afford it, but to teach people the importance of donating and defeating the label. I wanted to show them that these people don't care about where their clothes are coming from, but they are just merely lucky to have them. They don't care about if it's a mainstream piece or a counterculture piece. They just are lucky to have them. And next, this is my poster that I had and put around my school, put around a Dot Shalom in Corton for people to donate. It was kind of a synopsis of my paper while incorporating what I was focusing on for the clothing drive. So now my project in motion, actually doing the project. There wasn't much I could do once the drive had started besides encourage people to donate. But my fifth grade teacher who is still a fifth grade teacher, asked me to speak at Corton. And they asked me to teach the importance of giving back. And then they also asked me to talk about my project and what I was doing and what this community outreach program was. And I talked to them about when I got there. I introduced myself. I told them about my paper and as well as my project. Just the logistics, really though. And then I talked to them about what they could do to help and how important their help was to me, because without them this project would have been nothing. Lastly, I told them the importance of doing community service and what it's done for me and why I enjoy doing it. Although this initially wasn't a part of my community outreach plan, I'm very happy I did it, because I got to teach these kids not only to give, and they not only helped me, but I got to teach them to defeat the label. I taught them the dangers of commercialization, which was what I really learned in my paper, what my whole paper was really. Then a few weeks later, 2 weeks later, that was how long the drive was, and I'm back to pick up everything. When I went to Seahome in the Dot Shalom, the boxes were full, which I was very excited about. But then I went to Corton, and it wasn't just one box, but rather 3 huge carts full of boxes, where I couldn't even fit them all in my car. I had to have a friend come help me and pick them up too. Needless to say, I was very overwhelmed, but very excited at the same time to go and donate them the next day. And the next day, after a little repackaging, I fit everything in my car and headed over to the Baldwin Center. Once I got there, I not only was excited, obviously, but the people in charge of the Baldwin Center were ecstatic, as long as seeing the faces of the people buying my clothes. or obtaining my clothes, I'm sorry. I donate clothes many times in the past, but I had never gotten the real opportunity to see hands-on what these clothes was doing, where they were going. So in conclusion, here's Kids at Court unfolding some of the clothes. Here are all the clothes in my garage. In conclusion, this was an amazing experience. I wouldn't change any of it. I now have a changed perspective of trends, changed perspective of counterculture trends, and the importance of them. I've also learned that history is crucial for the future, and youth movements are the ones who are really making this history and creating these trends. It's important to notice them and notice their trends that they're making and the impact they have on society. Commercialization is destroying the meaning of these trends, and it's our duty to learn and teach the future generations about this. My clothing drive was a step to stop this. It was to show people that getting these clothes, it was to show people that some people who are less fortunate and are getting these clothes don't care about the label, they're merely thankful for the clothes. They don't care what it means. I tried to defeat mainstream trends by bringing I was trying to defeat what mainstream trends had to bring to the table, which was money. That's all they are. I focused on the meaning behind the clothes, the original intention they had, the original intention of army jackets, the original intention of grunge. Learn what they have to say and just wear what you like. And learn what the label represents, but don't let a label of mainstream or counterculture run your wallet. Thank you.